My name is Jamie Piles. I joined Samaritan in December of 1996. We were homeschooling our kids, and we were already thinking outside the world's box, if you will. And I saw a little tiny classified ad about this new kind of idea I'd never heard of before. My first reaction was, that's the kind of thing that we would do, isn't it? And so I finally called the number, talked to them, and the more I asked them questions, the more I liked their answers.
On the Fight Laugh Feast Network. What do you get when you mix Presbyterians with a Catholic talking about statism?
A huge fight.
You're about to find out. Pastor Toby, Chalk Knox, I'm the Water Boy. It's good to be with you guys.
We have ourselves an exciting summer coming up here at Cross Politic, and we want you to join us on the ride. First, we're no longer calling it the Fight Laugh Feast Club. It's now called The Pub.
Yeah.
Second, we're launching a new line of content focused on entertainment. Some of this content includes a new TV show called This America, a cooking show, a hunting show.
We're getting there. We don't want to overpromise and underdeliver on that.
Maybe a hunting show.
Yeah, there you go. That's better.
Live streaming of our conferences, of course, is still included in the package, and past conference talks, all bundled within our new polished Fight Laugh Feast app, which, Lord willing, will be dropping on July 1st.
Yeah. July 1st is going to be the, likely, it is going to be the new date.
Okay.
What happened in June?
Well, because it was going to be June 1st.
June, right?
Yeah, I know. That's what I was wondering, if that was a typo.
No, it's July 1st. There's some technical issues that we're ironing out. Plus, you got to go through like the whole submission process on iTunes, and they can take a while. So it'll probably be before then. But again, I feel like I overpromise and underdeliver on that June 1st date. So I'm just, maybe it's making a safe date.
Probably.
We'll be fine. We'll be fine.
Is the federal government, is it like...
Are they involved?
Are they designing our app?
I don't know. Statism maybe is.
Yeah. So anyways, we moved the launch date back so we can provide you with even more content upon its release. But that shouldn't stop you from signing up today. Head on over to fightlaughfeast.com and join the pub today. You can find that at fightlaughfeast.com. We're very grateful to have with us on the show today William T. Cavanaugh, or as we know him, Bill.
Yeah.
He's a professor of Catholic Studies and director of the Center for World Catholicism and Intercultural Theology at DePaul University. His degrees are from the University of Notre Dame, Cambridge, and Duke. He's the author of a number of books, with a new one coming out later this year from Oxford University Press entitled The Uses of Idolatry. He's married and has 3 sons. Bill, thank you for joining us on Cross Politic.
Oh, my pleasure.
So first off, I really want to hear about your new book, Uses of Idolatry. What's it about?
Well, it's about idolatry.
Yeah.
They actually wanted to give it a kind of more interesting title, but the Oxford University Press made me go with something boring and something that'll show up in search engines.
Yeah.
But the idea is it's in some ways a continuation or a sequel to a book I did called The Myth of Religious Violence about 10 years ago, in which I argued that there's no point for thinking that there's this thing called religion, which is inherently more violent than other things that are labeled as secular, that people kill for all sorts of things, that they worship as if they were gods, or worship religiously. And so there wasn't much theology in that book, so I've come back to the question of idolatry. I've been telling people for years that book was a book about idolatry, and so I came back and wrote another book about idolatry, and this time used the Bible and other theologians to analyze this question of idolatry.
Does Psalm 115 pop up in your analysis? Psalm 115 talks about you become like what you worship.
It actually does, yeah. Interestingly, Karl Marx makes a similar point when he talks about the fetishism of commodities, that we buy things and the commodities come alive to us, but the workers that actually make them are kind of drained of life. And this is a point that was made long before Marx by the psalmist, basically saying that, we invest animation, we kind of things come to life, these things that we make out of wood and stone come to life while the life gets drained out of the people that worship them. And so I've got a whole chapter in the new book on consumerism and another chapter on nationalism, where I talk about these kind of dynamics.
Wait, you consider nationalism some form of idolatry? I
do indeed.
So then you love Christian nationalism.
He's not a Christian nationalist.
So I am definitely not a Christian nationalist, but I don't think the problem is Christianity in some ways. I think the problem is nationalism.
Uh-huh.
So the problem is not just Christian nationalism. The problem is Christians being nationalists. And there's a long... So part of what I do in that chapter is show there's a long tradition in scholarship dating from the early 20th century talking about nationalism as a religion.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably right. And a lot of scholars arguing that it's the kind of it's what happens when Christianity fades in the West is people's ultimate loyalty gets transferred to the nation state.
So do you have a problem with the terminology as it's historically defined, the word nationalism as it is historically defined, or do you actually have a problem with some sort of massive Christian influence that influences our politics and our laws? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't think that there's anything particularly pernicious about Christians influencing our politics and our laws. I don't think that's any scarier than, anything else than secular ideologies influencing our laws and so on. I don't think that the church ought to be in charge. I don't want to return to the days of Christendom where, the Pope has an army. But I don't think that the basic problem is Christian influence. I think a lot of people are scared of Christian nationalism because of the Christianity, and that's not where I'm coming from. I'm scared of Christian nationalism because of the nationalism, right? The tendency to kind of make the nation state into an idol.
Like all idols, there's something good. So an idol, it seems to me, is taking something that God has made and investing in it, as you said, or
perverting it,
or trying to get from it something that God didn't intend us to get out of it, something that either He intended to give us directly or through some other means. And if that being the case, if idolatry is sort of a twisting or a perverting of some good thing that God made, is there a good thing called a nation that would exist if the gospel permeates a culture, and even if we grant that it might be very, very different than the modern nation state? Is there such a thing as a nation that is a good thing, a virtuous thing?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I'm trying to do in this book is give a sympathetic read of idolatry and say something like, what Paul says in Acts 17, where he's talking to the Athenians and he's distressed by their idolatry, but he says this is a sign that you're groping for God and may still find God. And so I want to give a kind of sympathetic read to idolatry in that way. And we're all idolaters in one way or another. And oftentimes it is just a perversion of something that's good. So I think, the kind of devotion to something bigger and higher than oneself, and the willingness to sacrifice oneself for one's brothers and sisters, one's community and so on. And so all of that, I think, is good. It gets perverted when it gets associated with violence, and it gets perverted when the nation becomes something which it's not, which is a god, the kind of provider of security and so on. I think one of the things that I'm arguing in this chapter on nationalism is that there's a lot of ways in which nationalism is kind of parasitic on more local forms of belonging, on kinship and family and community.
Right.
And it gets kind of blown up into this large sort of abstract, a nation of 300 and some million people stretched out across a continent. And the only way to get people's loyalty under those kinds of circumstances is to make nationalism into religion, is to make the nation state into an object that requires this kind of lethal loyalty, and that's when it becomes dangerous.
So, Bill, what's the like? You were starting to hit on it, but what's the kind of practical political ramifications for a nation going full into idolatry?
Yeah, I mean, the question of violence, of course, is one of the keys to this, right? I mean, you can tell what people believe by seeing what they're willing to kill for and to die for. And so oftentimes you find that there's an insistence when it becomes idolatrous, there's an insistence that you just have to do whatever the nation requires of you. And these kinds of sacrifices are required. And then the church kind of gives up its own ability to discern when violence might be justified and when it's not. This is something that in the Catholic world, this is something we saw in the Iraq War, where you've got the Pope and the bishops in the lead up to the Iraq War saying this is not a just war. And then you've got other Catholics saying, don't listen to the Pope. It's none of his business. You just need to do whatever the president decides, and it's your duty to go ahead and do that. And so part of the problem is just the removal of the discernment process from the church to the state.
I think you've quoted Alistair McIntyre's famous line about being asked to die for a modern nation state is like being asked to die for a telephone company. I think you've quoted that.
I've quoted that too many times. Yeah,
many times.
Like Verizon, maybe AT&T.
Maybe you need to update it to our internet company.
Yeah. Right.
But my question is so that's kind of what you're getting at a little bit here. But has that increased or decreased since COVID?
Mm-hmm.
Has what increased or decreased since COVID?
I guess that kind of demand, lockstep, loyalty, allegiance to a state that delivers its goods about as well as a telephone company.
Yeah, gosh, that's a really interesting question. I'm not sure. I mean, it's hard to separate out the rise of and hopefully fall of COVID with the rise of Christian nationalism, right? I mean, there does seem to be a sense, I think, amongst a lot of Christians that the country is falling apart, and the COVID pandemic is a kind of isolation that we've fallen into, and the response to that needs to be this kind of renewed passion for the nation state.
I guess I'm
not sure that's a good idea. Yeah.
No, I guess I'm thinking. I hear that. I see that side of maybe the way my question could be interpreted. What I'm thinking about, I guess, is the way. I mean, you talk in various places about the idol of state being that which grants us security and safety and health and that kind of thing. And it seems to me like we saw that on sort of a grand scale, rather than the local communities, family in particular, churches in particular, local communities banding together to decide what was best for themselves and care for themselves. We have these, sort of nationwide top-down lockdowns, vaccine mandates, this kind of thing, where, again, I think we were in many ways susceptible to that because we look to the state as the one who guarantees our safety and health and life.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Now I see where the question was going. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there was a lot of government overreach in the early. I mean, we didn't know what we were dealing with, but I think the basic instinct to see if the government can save us certainly kicked in under COVID, and it wasn't necessarily a good thing.
Very good. You look like you wanted to ask something, Knox. I was just waiting.
I'm still stuck at the Christian nationalism thing.
You want to go back there?
Yeah, I kind of want to go back there. So there's you spoke on this just a moment ago, talking about how I think answering Toby's question was actually kind of getting towards the question I want to go to. You said that a lot of Christians are looking around and they're seeing that, you see Target, you see Bud Light, you see all these people that are kind of going super trans, and the element of Christianity in the culture seems to be depleted. And everyone is seeing that and they're like, man, we need to do something. And the only two options that they're seeing is we go full trans or we go Christian nationalism, right? The first part of my question kind of is there, what do you see as a way in the middle? Because there doesn't seem to be any other option. It's Christian nationalism full on, or you're going trans.
Yeah.
You only have two choices.
Yeah, that's right. I'm not sure those are the only two choices. And this stuff about sexual ethics, I just think is really difficult, and everybody needs to kind of take a step back and take a breather on this. Sexual ethics is not my area, but I have a tendency to think that both sides are kind of hyperventilating at this point.
Really?
And, and I kind of feel like this is a new phenomenon, and we need to kind of wait and see how things work out. I'm happy to accommodate somebody if they want to use different pronouns or whatever. I don't think that necessarily means that I should be compelled to use declare my pronouns whenever I'm presenting myself in public or something like that. So,
that's surprising, because you just wrote a book on idolatry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and you seem to be really comfortable with the
sexual idolatry,
the sexual idolatry that's coming out of the left.
Yeah, I mean, this is not what I'm really prepared to talk about, but I'm not an ideologue on either side of that fight. I want to see what's about this new phenomenon. I know people that have had experiences with gender dysphoria, and this is a new thing to me. And I want to see what we can do to accommodate people and accompany them on their journey. But I don't want to go to the opposite extreme either, and insist that everybody change in order to make accommodations. I mean, in some ways, I think of this on analogy with the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. We put in wheelchair ramps. We didn't take away all stairs.
I just want to press just a little more, because this actually goes to my question. I'm asking about this wide range between the two, Christian nationalism and the new way America's going. And I'm asking kind of for what the standard is. And then so the sexual side of it, you kind of say you don't want to go to either ditch, but then it's as if we don't have a standard on how God made humans.
Yeah. Again, sexuality is not my area, and I'm not going to go to the mat on this and say. I think it's true that for the most part, people are identify with the biological sex that they're born with. There's an increasing number of people who don't. And so what I want to do is take a step back and say, okay, what's the Christian way to respond to this new phenomenon?
Bill, maybe ask the question this way. What are your, when you think of American idolatry, what's your biggest, maybe top three forms of idolatry that concern you?
The two test cases that I took in the book are nationalism and consumer culture. But I think there's a lot of other kind of candidates that would make for interesting studies. Racism, technology, celebrity. There's a lot of different ways that you can go in this if you're looking at different kinds of idolatry. But the two that I chose and the two that I know something about and have studied for years are nationalism and consumer culture. And that encompasses, I think, a lot of other areas as well. What I mean by the economy is something much larger than just what we do with our money, but it's a whole kind of culture that has an effect on lots of other different things.
Bill, do you think? I want to go in like three different directions now, and I'm trying to try to narrow it down. But I guess just a brief comment, and then I'll actually ask you a different question. The comment is just simply, it seems like something. I mean, I think it would be really cool, given your interest in idolatry, to see you study actually the how often sexual perversion is part of idolatry.
That's right.
I mean, paganism going way back has always included sodomy and cult prostitution and pedophilia and transvestitism and ancient forms of transgenderism. Those are very common elements in idolatry. I mean, when you have pagan shrines, those are things that commonly show up and not accidentally. That's not an accident at all. Anyways, that's just a comment, and maybe your next book can be on the sexual fetishes of idolatry. But my question is whether or not you have given much thought to. I want to go back to you mentioned the Myth of Religious Violence book. You've got that as one of your titles. Why has that myth been so successful, you think, in the modern West? Why have we assumed that secularism is necessary for peace?
Well, because it's the secularists that have power, right? I mean, it's an ideology. What I try to trace, the history that I try to trace in the book, is the kind of transfer of power from the church to the nation state in the modern era, and the victors get to tell the story, right? And so the last chapter of that book is about the uses to which the myth is put. Domestically, one of the uses that it's put to is marginalizing, especially Christians, but increasingly also Jews and Muslims in the United States. Domestically, the myth of religious violence is invoked in all of the decisions banning school prayer and banning aid to Christian schools and so on. And the way it gets used in foreign policy is to underwrite kind of colonial adventures in the Middle East and so on, right? That, you can't reason with Muslims, you can only bomb them. And so it's a very useful myth, but it's a myth that that's ultimately untrue.
Go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that. What do you think about I have no idea if I've read anything by you about the founding of America. I mean, I saw that genealogy you just described makes a little bit better sense to me in Europe, pre-modern Europe and the development of the nation state in Europe. But what about America, where it seems like the vast majority of those who were in power were self-conscious Christians of some stripe? What about here? Why have we as Americans been so susceptible to that myth?
Well, I think the idea that the founding fathers were all devout Christians is problematic to begin with. I mean, you think of some of the most influential ones like Thomas Jefferson with his scissors and his Bible, right? Literally cutting out all of the parts of the gospel where Jesus does something miraculous because he doesn't believe lists, and not really Christians in much of a significant sense at all. That I mean, one of the things that people don't understand, I think, is that America, in the period of the Revolutionary War, was much less churched, and it really, America becomes a churched society starting in the 1820s with the Great Awakening and so on. So I think the idea that this was all that, you know, it was founded as a Christian country and then it's all been downhill since then is not true. And one of the things that helps us realize is that there's ups and downs, and it's not all one direction. You know, used to be good, now it's lousy, and then you get into all kinds of dangerous nostalgia. So I don't think so. There's always been a kind of dynamic between Christianity and more Enlightenment influenced ideas in the United States. And so it's struggle that America was not one thing and then suddenly in the last 20 years it all went to hell or something like that. There's always been this kind of struggle between these two different visions of the country and the culture.
But you got to look at the laws that we were making then. They seem a little more Christian back then in the colonies, right?
I mean, no, really. I mean, you've certainly got, in Massachusetts, for example, where you've got, an established church, and most of the colonies had established churches, with the exception of, Roger Williams and in some ways, Pennsylvania. But as far as people actually going to church on Sundays, America was actually much less churched in the period of the Revolution than they were in the middle of just as a matter of historical fact.
So you're saying, you just broke up, I'm just clarifying what you said. America was less churched in the Revolutionary War, but it was more churched in the 1820s in the Second Great Awakening, is what you were saying.
Right. That's when the churchedness of America becomes much more pronounced over the course of the 19th century.
But I think what Knox was asking was, so maybe it is historically fact that there was a lot less church attendance. But he was asking about the actual laws on the books. So like the colonies themselves,
seem to be extremely Christian.
Have their colonial charters and then their state constitutions. Yes, and then the laws that are actually on the books seem far more Christian than what we have on the books today.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, in some ways, problematically.
Sure.
The legitimation of slavery, or the law on the books in Massachusetts that Catholics couldn't own land and things like that. Up until the Constitution, you don't have a guarantee of religious freedom, and so that can be problematic. I think in a lot of ways it was a more Christian era than it is today. But I just want to be sure that we are wary of a certain kind of a nostalgia that sees this golden era in the past.
Trust me, I'm not having that problem. I'm going to tell you right now. I'm not having that problem. I get the nostalgia effect. I'm with
you. Bill, so maybe talk positively about what would you think would be a good political solution? Do you think that
that's just what an idolater would say, Gabe? There's no political solutions.
That's true. I mean, what do you think would make for a? How about this? What would make you make for a good nation? Should there be one dominating religion? What do you think would make for a good nation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Christian, and I believe that Jesus Christ is the Lord of history. And so I think that if I had to, design my ideal world, then we would all be followers of Jesus. In some ways, I just think that Christianity is true. right? What I don't want to do is impose that on anybody through coercion. That's what happened in the period of Christendom, and I don't think it was good for the gospel, and I don't think it was good for the world ultimately either.
As a Protestant, I mean, we've forgiven the Catholic Church for the 1500s, 1600s.
Hey, Bill.
Hold on. I got to read one more ad, and then we'll sign off here.
We'll take all the forgiveness we can get.
Before we have a new religious war on our hands. How are you paying for your health care, and how's it working out? If it's working perfectly, great. But if not, listen closely, because I have a solution for you. That's actually a biblical solution. Samaritan Ministries is a community of Christians who pay one another's medical bills. Here's how it works. When a medical need arises, you choose the provider that's right for you and have a say in the treatment you receive, even if it's a non-conventional approach. Your medical bills are then shared with fellow members, fellow Christians, and your need is covered in prayer. It's affordable. You can join anytime. You can even join today. Learn more today at SamaritanMinistries.org/crosspolitic.
Hey, Bill, where can people find out about you, read your articles, and buy your new book?
I would say, so the book is going to be available from Oxford University Press, as was the Myth of Religious Violence book. So I have a critique of the whole idea of Amazon, and I'm asking people not to buy it on Amazon, but go directly to the publishers. But I'm all over. I got a whole bunch of videos on YouTube and so on, so it's not hard to find me. You can just Google William T. Cavanaugh.
Awesome.
Very good.
There.
Appreciate you joining us, Bill.
If you're single, get married. If you're married, have you some kids. And if you have kids, go baptize them. Until tomorrow, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Go fight, laugh, and feast. This is Cross Politic.
It is the duty of the free man to resist tyranny at every turn. Every man will either watch his freedom stripped away or take action to protect what he loves. Introducing the A3, the newest revolutionary body armor from Armored Republic. The A3 is the new standard for lightweight multi-hit body armor. A3 plates are incredibly light at 4.6 pounds. The patented design captures fragmentation while remaining multi-hit capable. The A3 will stop up to M80 ball, yet comes in at only 0.7 inches thick. The A3 is the thinnest NIJ .06 compliant or certified composite standalone plate that includes the drop test. The A3 is the first of its kind, patent pending, that combines an alloy strike face with polyethylene backing, revolutionizing body armor technology by providing strength and durability while remaining sleek and maneuverable. The A3 is the new standard in lightweight body armor. The fight against tyranny just got stronger.
The Word of God is living and active, sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing to the division of soul and of spirit, of joints and marrow. Through the Spirit, God's Word changes lives. It cuts us to the heart and reshapes us. As you strive to read and study Scripture, having a good set of tools can help. From setting reminders for a great reading plan, to word studies and commentaries that shed light on difficult passages, to listening on the go, the Olive Tree Bible app can help you dig into the Word wherever you are. Olive Tree Bible app. Read, study, listen, anywhere.